So it just seems like a very unconscious moment. And I think to facilitate a sense of consciousness, it's good to kind of go back to the foundation of the psyche, which is the fact that we all kind of are playing with ideas and symbols that emerge from the collective unconscious. So, welcome to Soror Mystica, a podcast exploring life's mysteries and magic through its symbols.
I'm Mariana Lewis, an archetypal tarotist.
And I'm astrologer Christina Farella.
And just as the Soror Mystica guided the alchemist through his holy work, we hope to be your mystic sisters in these conversations, guiding you deeper into the symbolic life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 43rd episode of Soror Mystica. It's been a little while since we've said hi to everybody. We are in an intense year. Pluto's moving around, elections are happening, life is moving. So we're glad to be here. And hi, Christina. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm here.
We're here. So before we get into today, we're talking about the collective unconscious, which is something that we've, referred to so many times already on the podcast. And so we thought it would be a good idea to really get our foundations in that and what that means when we're talking about it and how we experience it on a personal level and on a collective level. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. And before we do that, we each have announcements that we need to make. I'll quickly go first. I'm teaching Tarot and Psyche, which is a class that I have taught with the Young Academy a couple years ago and was really well received. It was pretty popular offering, so it was extremely exciting to see. And this is a 4-week class. It's happening Tuesdays starting January 14th. And it's a live class that will be recorded, so you can watch it later. Don't worry. And it's basically just a dive into tarot through a Jungian perspective. So if you are new to tarot and want to, but have some kind of familiarity with Jung or depth psychology or symbols or any of those sorts of things and want to think about how do we think of the cards in that way, this is a great class for you. Or opposite, if you are familiar with the cards but don't really know how to kind of get into the Jungian thinking or the depth psychological thinking with it, then it's also for you. It's definitely oriented more towards people who are looking for that introduction to, approaching it that way. So if you have really been studying this for many, many years, this is probably not exactly the class for you. But if you are one of these people that's like, hey, how do we marry these things together? This is going to be fantastic. So that is, the link will be obviously below, or you can go to jungeracademy.com and they'll have it up. So that's my announcement. What's your announcement?
Cool. I just want to say everyone should take that class if they haven't taken it already. It's going to be amazing, and
they
I'm
have
really
an
excited.
Early bird right now, so at the point that this comes out, they should still have the early bird pricing. I do not know when that's going to shift, so I would say if you're really thinking about it, probably buy your tickets sooner rather than later to save a little bit of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's always a good idea. Yeah, I think they do that with all their classes. They have like a good early bird promo, and then they put the real price up. So everyone should definitely jump on that and start their new year with that. I am holding my annual forecasting for the new year event. So specifically forecasting for the astrology of 2025, which is going to be rip-roaring, weird, different, and very powerful astrology coming our way. And so I'm having that event on Saturday, December 21st. I think I'm doing it at like 1 p.m. EST. But it's recorded. It's held on Zoom. It's like a 2-hour webinar, and you get a supplementary workbook that has journaling pages to kind of keep track of your responses to the transits of the new year, and then a really good table of all of the dates, degrees, and kind of little summaries month by month of all of that stuff. I use all my Virgo power to consolidate information for the sake of this class, but I work with that document for the rest of the year too. So you're really getting my kind of, treasure trove of data that I make up for myself to do all my other work. So join me there. There'll be a link down below. If you're not in my time zone, again, it's on Zoom, it's recorded. You'll have forever access to the materials, and hopefully it's a good tool for planning your year ahead, which is upon us. My calendar is also open for December readings. And I only open my books on a monthly basis, and sometimes I don't open my books. So if you've been wanting to get a reading with me for the purpose of looking at the new year or just kind of checking in, now is a great time to do so. So I welcome you to do that. The last thing I'll say, and maybe this is like too much in the future, but I'm going to be teaching my foundational astrology for beginners class starting this January. So if you are a fan of this show and you're really curious about astrology, you're really inspired by astrology, but you have no idea what the difference between a planet and a house and a sign actually is, this is going to be a really good immersion into that material that is approachable, but also really, really, I would say, like enriching to one's astrological perspective. So there's a wait list open right now. You can jump on the wait list. That's another link in our little notes on this episode. And yeah, I hope to see you there if you're looking for some astro guidance in the new year. So that's me.
Awesome. Got lots and lots of good stuff going on. Definitely, if you've been thinking about doing a reading, grab that, because Christina's books are often closed or full. So that's a good opportunity when she has some spots to grab. Okay, now let's get into, I guess what are you reading right now? Are you reading anything interesting?
I'm reading a lot of things really fragmentarily, but the thing that I'm reading most consistently and about to finish is a novel called Vivian, and it's by what is her name? Her last name is Russo. Emilia Russo. She is a really interesting writer, occultist, who is, like, I would say, one of our contemporaries. And this is her debut novel. It's a really weird story about the art world and like a grandmother, a granddaughter, and a mother all kind of like, and they're fucked up relationships together. And it's just a very surreal, dreamy, sharp social commentary, good weirdo book. So I'm enjoying that, and I'm going to finish it soon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. I'm reading a lot of things, as always. So I'm reading Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, which someone recommended to me a long time ago. That's my audiobook of the moment, which is it's like about a young girl who, like, every time I'm kind of sort of at the beginning still, but it seems like every time she dies, she remembers, like, when she comes back, like, she's not coming back, but it's as if she's doing her life again, starting from the beginning each time. And she kind of remembers the last time she dies. Oh, I shouldn't do that. Like, or this is what happens next. So it's a very interesting kind of like trial and error, like life experience. And it's very British, and it's set in the early 20th century. So it's very interesting. I'm enjoying that. And then I'm also reading Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, which is historical fiction novel about Thomas Cromwell, which is random, but I love historical fiction, so that's being fun. And the funny thing is I randomly started both these things and found out that they're both shows that have already been produced. So that is like the most rewarding thing. And you find the thing that you'd randomly decide to read is going to then be a show that you can yell about for a while afterwards that they didn't do it correctly. And I'm also reading Mother's Tongue, which is a little bit out of my typical kind of nonfiction brain space. And it's a book about the linguistics of women. So it's like a study of how words describing women, about women, related to women have developed through the English language.
That's so interesting. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this are like writing that name down right now. Just did.
Yeah, it's a very interesting book indeed. It's very easy read. It's not like super academic, and the author definitely wanted it to be approachable. So it's a very approachable read. And it's feminist. It's not pretending not to be a feminist book. It has a clear angle on trying to kind of rescue the original agenda of words, which have been very, very corrupted by patriarchy. So It's cool. It's a very cool book. So I'm slowly working my way through that because, as you can imagine, reading about words gets a little bit dry after a while. So I take some breaks, go read some fiction, come back. But it's nice to kind of get out of the young mysticism headspace I tend to put myself in when I'm reading my nonfiction stuff and just go in a totally different direction. So that's been fun.
Yeah, that's great. It all sounds really good.
All right, so let's talk about the collective unconscious. I can start by giving us a bit of a definition of what the collective unconscious is.
Please do.
The collective unconscious is an idea that comes from Jung. And of course, surprise, surprise. And I think the best way to understand what it is to kind of use Jung's own explanation he gives in his memoirs. So when we think about, most people understand the basic difference between the conscious and unconscious. This comes straight from Freud of like, there's a part of us that is aware, that knows what we're doing, understands ourselves, makes choices, etc. And there's a part of us that is acting under the surface. You know, we have those Freudian slips, we have dreams, we have experiences that are like, where does that come from? It comes from some part of me that I'm not aware of. So that's the unconscious. In Freud's understanding of the psyche, this is where it ends. We have these two halves, basically, at its basic level. Jung believed that was far too limited. He believed that there was more. So he had this dream, and he had this dream, and I think he brought it to Freud, and Freud was like, "You're a maniac. Leave me alone with this nonsense." They ended up, their breakup was basically because of Jung's idea that there was more than just these two halves of the psyche. And so in his dream, he's in a house, and it's a 19th century parlor. Jung was born in 1875, I want to say. So, basically like contemporary for him. So he's there, and he's like, oh, quite nice little house. And then he finds a staircase, and he says, there's a staircase going down to he was on the second floor. Let's go down to the first floor and see what's there. He goes down, he finds himself in a medieval manor. And he's like, oh, this is much older. It's cool. I'm all of a sudden 500 years in the past or whatever it is. And then he finds yet another staircase, and he goes, we have to go down more. So he goes down another level. When he gets there, he finds himself in an ancient Roman ruin, right? Like the bones of an old Roman house, and the bricks are kind of crumbling. And he's like, oh, I'm in some place that's very old now, very ancient. And then he finds like a trap door. He goes down the trap door, and then he finds himself in a cave with bones all around and pottery shards. And he realizes that he is in this like primordial space before history and before language and all these things, just like this base of humankind. And he woke up from this dream, and he like understood it right away, in that there's these deepening levels of the psyche. He starts off in the parlor that's contemporary to the time in which he was born, so it feels like that's the ego, that's the sense of like, this is where I am, I live here, this is what I know. Then he goes down a level into what is the personal unconscious. So he goes down to the place where these are shadowy things. We go back in time. So symbolically, we go deeper into what he calls the whole spiritual heritage of mankind's evolution. So this is like he's going back down into the spiritual heritage of humanity. So in that medieval space, is in that personal unconscious, meaning that it's in all the stuff he doesn't know about himself, what's personal to him. When he goes down into the Roman layer, to him that symbolized going down into like the ancient network, right? The Romans being like the great empire that kind of took over everything. So he's in this place that is in the collective unconscious, and that's what we're talking about today, where it's deeply ancient, and it carves out these roads that connects us all. And then below that, he believed in what he called the psychoidal unconscious, which is like definitely the most mystical, metaphysical, weird idea, which is basically that there is a level of unconsciousness even below the collective unconscious that is basically, I would say, like psychic unconsciousness, where not absolute knowledge, what he called absolute knowledge, exists. And so this is like the bones of like consciousness itself and all of it. So that's where we get really sort of mystical and even religious, spiritual in that way. But focusing on that collective unconscious, this is an idea that has been widely adapted into our understanding of the world. I think a lot of people believe in the collective unconscious, even if they don't think of it quite, in those terms. And they believe in this idea that there is a level of understanding of the world and experience of the world that is universal to everyone. And that's where the archetypes live. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the idea of mother, you might have a really bad mother who doesn't take really good care of you, but we know what in our bones and our instinct, we know what a mother is, right? It's a universal archetype that can't be changed. So something else like, I don't know, catastrophe. This is like a universal experience. We all know that when things fall apart, we all know that experience of that dark night of the soul, or that kind of feeling of hopelessness or whatever. These are universal experiences that everyone has touched in some way at some point. And so that's what we really mean when we're talking about the collective unconscious, is that it is unconscious but collective. Mm-hmm. We all play a part in it. It's one of the critiqued theories because we have to believe basically that there is universality to all people across all culture and time and everything. And for some people, that's hard to believe. But that's, I think it's proved by the fact that we have these symbols. This is the point of the show, that again and again appear universally and seem to hold some quality to them that mm-hmm. that we all innately understand. And so these are ways that we can identify the collective unconscious in the world.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that that's like a perfect, I love the images of that dream, because it just is such a perfect encapsulation of like going lower and lower and mm-hmm. deeper and deeper, and finding more and more ancient and primordial ways of experiencing life. And so, the ways that the theory is critiqued makes sense, because mm-hmm. we live in a very obviously multicultural world where there's a lot of conflict over culture. And I think that, rightfully so, some people will bristle at the idea of like, oh, we're all the same. We're all coming from mm-hmm. the same place, because there are different levels of, access to resources. There are different levels of access to different social experiences, depending mm-hmm. on pretty much like where you're born in this world at this point. But I think that's a global capitalism issue. But, the proof to me of the relevance and importance of the collective unconscious is the fact that no matter what culture you study, the myths all have the same kind of building blocks and or similar patterns or very similar characters. We all have like a Jesus or a Buddha or, what have you, these kind of like prophet figures. Mm-hmm. We all have these symbols of like apocalypse and revelation and, the birth of things, the mother archetype, the sun, the moon. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, those things are constant. And those are the building blocks of not only religion, but art mm-hmm. and therefore culture. And so, I think that it's a really important time to be tuned into the idea of the collective unconscious. We are recording this, early December 2024, and we've just seen the assassination of a healthcare CEO in broad daylight in Manhattan. Insane. And then, did you hear they found his backpack and it was full of Monopoly money? They found his backpack in Central Park and it's full of Monopoly money.
I did not hear that.
And then every news anchor is like, what's the motive? I'm like, well, this is why we need symbolic awareness, because mm-hmm. that's definitely a clue. But anyway, I digress. And then, of course, after, the election that we just witnessed, there is a lot
of projections
of powerful
everybody
symbols
is trapped in a projection
coming up from the collective unconscious, and mm-hmm. it is kind of controlling us at this point. We're all kind of at the mercy of the projections of people that we deem to be on the other side of things, mm-hmm. And people are getting very caught up in their own stories, and so it just seems like a very unconscious moment. And I think to facilitate a sense of consciousness, it's good to kind of go back to the foundation of the psyche, which is the fact that we all kind of are playing with ideas and symbols that emerge from the collective unconscious. So that was kind of what our idea was for today, to explore this, because how do we really work with this? We are living in a really overwhelming, pardon my phrase, fucked up moment. And it's been this way for a long time. But I think that this definitely feels like a crescendo. We could talk about the astrology of it for sure. But on a human level, how do we deal with and make sense of and maybe take refuge in the fact that this is the particular moment that we're living in? And I think that symbolic awareness is a really good kind of like port in a storm, at least for me, and I'm sure it is for you too, Mariana. So yeah, I think that with that big idea, and I love like that the collective unconscious is basically the reason why Freud and Jung had to stop being friends, because Freud was like, it's all sex, and Jung was like, I think there's something else going on here. So maybe let's think about that. And Freud was just like, no, it's just desire. So whatever.
Freud had a lot of complexes, man.
I mean, don't we all? But yeah, he did.
He had some big ones.
He did. I think that the men who usually write these narratives that we still exist inside of had tons of complexes that get filtered into our definitions of psychology and success and all of that stuff. So that's also a sticky conversation. But yeah, so I think that having that idea, right, and a lot of times I'm sure this comes up in your classes in particular because you lecture about Jung's ideas and the collective unconscious a lot. It's very abstract, and that image of the dream gives it some concrete, at least symbolic or creative detail. So I hope that feels clarifying to people to hear. And then, I think that, what are some other examples that you think are kind of emergent right now of the collective unconscious sort of like belching forth things that, that we're not really considering where it's coming from?
I think that, something that we see a lot is whenever we get worked up with a figure, a happening in society of any kind, and it's not just like, that's like a problem, let's find a solution to fix it, or that's interesting, and we get like emotionally involved. It's a really good like display of how the collective unconscious is active and how we're engaged in a projection. So something that Jung believed, and a lot of other depth psychologists believe, and I really believe too, is that the biggest threat to humankind is not the ways that we're going to destroy ourselves, which we will, but the fact that we cannot face, realize, and integrate the collective shadow, which is part of the collective unconscious. So, for example, Jung wrote an essay about Hitler, and he got a lot of criticism for it. And I haven't actually read it, so it might be bad. I don't really know. I've not wanted to read it, but I know that the thing that he says in it is basically that Hitler is a projection for the ancient kind of German deified figure of Wotan, who is this like thunder war god, right? And so he was gaining popularity because people were seeing him as this archetypal figure of like the master, the god, he has all the power. We have to put our faith in him. And people weren't looking at him critically, because he was enmeshed in a collective projection of the German people who had this long heritage of this figure. We see that all the time. This happens all the time, where we find somebody or a situation in the world and we project onto it this experience of something mythic that is divorced from critical thinking. And it's not because we're idiots and we're humanity stupid. It's because we think so much of us is activated and processes through that realm of the collective unconscious. Things speak to us through at that level. We can't look at, I'm trying to think of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo right now are on everyone's feed and For You page and all this stuff, because they are like they are like presenting themselves as like the like archetypes of like the gentle little nuns. They're like like they're too spiritual and they're too gentle, and everything is like there's that have you seen that clip of Cynthia Erivo talking about the interviewers like, people are holding space for lyrics of Defying Gravity? Yeah. And she's like, I didn't know that's happening. And then everyone's making fun of it, because what we're seeing on a collective level is somebody who sees themselves as important, who's moving people in this enormous way. And there's a little trigger point in us that goes, what? And it's something, because we all have that collective experience of knowing what it's like to be a little inflated, a little too self-important, to think that the tiny thing we're doing has some kind of huge global effect. And so we see that, we hear that, and we laugh at it, or we have some kind of reaction to it, because it taps into that archetypal experience, that experience that lives in the collective unconscious. So this is why we can make fun of it. This is why we can have humor, I think, at all, is because we all participate in the same experiences that we know to be shameful or selfish, or whatever it might be, that we can mock or make fun of, or bring lightness to. These are ways that we see it all the time. But that's just like a small example of it, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, the weird, like, microcurrent of Wicked coverage set against the absolute dystopian stuff that's going on in whatever the rest of reality is so weird and so striking. And I will always remember how, like, every news feed was just like disaster, disaster, disaster. And then, like, there's Ariana Grande and she's like translucent and like perfect.
That's a great word for her. She's completely translucent.
She's immensely talented. She's also very see-through right now, and I've been worried about her. But there is a lot that it's such a strange counterpoint, but people are obsessed with, like, the phenomenon of Wicked in general. Wicked's important to a lot of people, I understand. But it's a very interesting thing where I think that also, that play, or that whatever the movie now, is such a deep piece of art for so many people who identify as, like, being outcast and being misunderstood, and
finding power where there is none to be found.
So that's very important message right now, when we all feel quite disempowered and quite helpless in the face of things, right? So I think it's a cool way of practicing, like, media literacy, to be like, wow, people are really just piling on the idea of holding space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity, which is a hilarious meme out of context. But it's also like, well, where is that coming from? Why are we needing to either put this down, or why are we needing to hold space for these lyrics right now? What's going on either way? Right? So the collective unconscious just kind of, like, decides where our attention goes in a lot of these circumstances.
Yeah. I think that the best way to kind of encapsulate where a society is to see what they're afraid of at the moment. Like, if we look at the medieval world, how many visuals do we have of, like, a devil who's eating people, like, with its ass? You know what I mean? It's just like, the grotesque is what's terrifying. People are enchanted, like mesmerized and terrified of the grotesque of the devil in this very particular form. Like, we think of the devil now and we think of, like, exorcist movies where it's, like, very scary. There's demons, there are dark shadows, we can never see it. It's not the way in the medieval world. They were, like, green. they had like humans would crawl on them like ants, like, it was a very particular image, and it gives us a clue as to what they were repressing at the time. They were repressing their bodies. They were repressing, the like, being an incarnated human being. Like, everything was, forget the human flesh, everything's about the spirit. And so, of course, we see bodies being disgusting and the devil's body being disgusting. Today, what are we most afraid of? The apocalypse. Every movie is about the apocalypse. That is not an accident. That is because that is what is in the collective unconscious right now. The awareness and terror of the fact that we have risen to the role of God and will destroy ourselves because we have that kind of divine power at this point. And, even going back to the 70s, what was the big thing at the moment then? Zombies. Everyone had all the zombie movies were coming out because everyone was mindless. It was Vietnam era, and it was there was the beginning of globalization really, really kind of skyrocketing at the time. The computers came, a few decades later. The internet rather. It was this time when people were afraid of mindlessness. Consumerism was at its it was with the 50s and 60s. Consumerism was just insanely, plastic was everywhere. It was just that time when this is what people were afraid of and seeing. And so there's this collective terror around it. And so that idea of mindlessness was everywhere. This is, these are proofs that there is a collective unconscious, because our horror movies, the things we're scared of, they double down on it, and we keep eating it up as much as we can because it's the only way we can face it is through some kind of prism of art or media, right? So that it's not direct. To face it directly is to realize that we're overwhelmed and that it's, there's a sense of our smallness in it, but to look at it through that lens at arm's distance allows us to do some kind of processing. So that is proof that there's a collective unconscious that's active in all of us, which is terrifying.
No, but it's so interesting. And I think what's funny about the concept and the term collective unconscious is that it seems like it would be something that was like very hidden and very secret and very like invisible, but it's the loudest thing ever. And if you spend time thinking about this stuff like we do, it's very easy to just identify immediately like what people's weird projections are based on their obsessions, their fears, their whatever. I'm not a psychologist, but there's something I think that lets me personally take a step back from really extreme discourse when I hear it, not to ignore it and not to bypass it, but to remind myself that like this is, yes, people are saying crazy stuff right now, but it's also coming from a deeply, deeply rooted, deeply archetypal place that they have like almost not a lot of awareness of. And so it's kind of, it's a way, maybe this is like hubris, but like I comfort myself with this idea.
No,
like
I think that's what we're supposed to do. Something that, that we're all seeing here in America is that the division between us and other is insane, right? And I think that is part of the collective unconscious. That is a natural instinct in the collective unconscious when there is, especially when the shadow is so repressed as it is, that there has to be an us and an other. And it's like, it's a wild thing to me when I the more I've seen this happening, the more I'm like, people live in the same city, they have the same jobs, they go to the same restaurants, and yet they feel like they are from entirely different universes. How can that be true? And there is just in that, the realization that we all participate in the same collective unconscious should be something that actually like makes us realize how much we are ruled by this projection. And that's not, it's not criticism on either side, because we all do it. Like there's everybody participates in that to some extent, at least in the US right now. It's like, it's just unavoidable from anyone. And it's just this idea of like, we're both experiencing the exact same thing and just pointing our finger at the other side, but we're exactly the same. And, realizing that we're both playing out. We are both the hero trying to rescue the world. That's both sides is what they're doing. They just have these projections on the other because of the intensity of the moment. And like, I try very hard, maybe to the annoyance of people around me sometimes, of like to say, oh well, they're the same as me, and that creates a lot of contention within us, because they're like, but they're not, but they are. Exactly. And everyone has roots in this collective unconscious. So everyone has those same universal experiences, participates in those same archetypal experiences, and is on the same, hero's path in their own individual way. And I think that that's one of the ways that we can think of it. It's a challenge for us, especially when we're trapped in this feeling of either helplessness or fear, or all of these things, to realize that the collective unconscious unites us. It is the great uniting force that says we all experience universal humanity. No one gets to say you don't get to take part in it, or it's just for me. It can be a mediating force if we let it.
It should be, but people have been people are comforted by these stories of them being the hero, where it's necessary for them to be the hero so that they don't completely dissemble themselves. And at the end of the day, like, it's really all of us versus billionaires, unfortunately.
Well, yeah.
And that's like the true division.
Everyone but them.
That's it. They're also ruled by their own projections and fears. You see them building bunkers.
Well, yeah, because they're God. So exactly. they have their own. I mean, just imagine. Can you imagine, like, having that amount of power and resource and not thinking that you're God? Of course they do.
Of course
they do. Not consciously, but they do.
No, I know. It's just, it's insane. Something else that I thought was really interesting this week was that, after the United Healthcare man was killed, there was so much like hilarious and dark humor on the internet of like people commenting on posts announcing this news, being like hope his, claim for bullet wounds will be covered by insurance, and like all that's kind of stuff, because we all do just suffer being at the mercy of these really predatory healthcare companies. And so, like, then other people on both sides of the aisle are trying to say, oh, this is such a dark moment, people are making fun of violence and they're like taking pleasure in it. And it's like, no, actually, but there's so much pain in the collective around whether or not we have the right to dignified care when we are sick or when we're old, that people are going to make these kinds of comments at this point when they see this person who is a symbol for that kind of power get, murdered. I mean, it's terrible, but it's a really, really interesting thing to think about, that there's so much built up pain in the collective. And then it, of course, expresses itself through like memes and humor, because that's like how we can cope at this point, because that's like our level of power, basically. But I think that that's something else to be aware of, is that we're going to keep seeing Pluto in Aquarius is not messing around. We are going to keep seeing these very powerful systems get questioned, called out, and dismantled by the people. This is what's going to, I'm not prophesying violence or anything like that, but that's literally what Pluto in Aquarius symbolizes. And Pluto just moved into Aquarius on November 19th. So we're here for the next 20 years. And that's what we're going to be examining, is like, how have we let these structures be built, and how can they actually serve the collective in a real meaningful way, rather than what they've been doing up until now. Right. So I think that if anybody is like listening to this or having anxiety over the news, or having this kind of like, I've had moments of, fear and like, what the fuck is going on the past couple of weeks. Just know that we're observing something kind of like become awakened in the collective unconscious. So not to say again that we can get around it, bypass it, ignore it, be superior because we know things, whatever. But it's a very important time to be paying attention to what's rising up from that space, I would say.
And it's an important time to realize that, the world outside of yourself is telling you a story, and it's important for you to question what that story is outside of the symbols. Everything we experience is a symbol for something. And something I, like to say, I've said to you, is that we always just go with the better story. Like we don't often pause ourselves and say, well, like, let's let's sit down and be democratic about things and thoughtful about things and empirical about things. There is an instinct in human nature to go with the story because we know the story in our blood. That is where it comes from, the collective unconscious. And I don't think that that's wrong necessarily. It's not a wrong impulse. The task is to be conscious of the story and to know how we're playing into it, what role we're playing in it, and what power do we have inside of it. So, for example, if we feel like we are under the thumb of a tyrant, that's a story we're playing in our head that has a collective thing. So what can we do in that? What power do we have psychologically, psychospiritually to bring consciousness around that story? How would myths and stories help us with that experience? How does the hero take back the power from the tyrant? And of course, we're always limited in the realities of the way things are. We're not trying to ignore that, but we are participating in a story inside of ourselves and, psychologically. And so we can find a little bit of power in that, to reorient ourselves and to bring consciousness to what we are doing in the world and what kind of actions we are taking to keep playing into a story ourselves. And I think that's the little tiny bit of power we do have. And it's kind of depressing to think of it that way sometimes, but I really do think it's true.
I think that it's not depressing, but it's a different way of approaching these experiences, because I think that if we root ourselves back into story or myth, and what does that really mean when people say that? It's like, how do you root yourself into myth? That's like as vague as holding space for defying gravity. Like when I say that, what I mean is literally think of fairy tales and stories that that kind of have a similar tone or focus or characterization as what you're seeing in the real world, and remind yourself of what happens in that story. Stories exist because they mimic psychological and power dynamic experiences that are real.
That are in the collective unconscious.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. And so when we can kind of like pin our experiences to the model of a story, it can be affirming. It can let us know what our next step is. At this point, Theseus gets lost, or might get lost in the maze. What does he do next? Right? What's our next step? And that allows us to feel like we again have agency in this. Yeah. And I think that it subtly changes the way that the collective works when we are able to recognize, we are living through a story that we are being told or that we're telling ourselves. How can we question that narrative, and what can we bring in to shift it so that it actually is going to serve us as individuals and be better for the collective? It's very minute, minuscule work, but I don't think that it's for nothing. I think that the whole point of this podcast is to bring deeper awareness to the stories and symbols that we all do collectively share, to be like, we are one, not to sound so corny, but
the
biggest lie is that we're different from each other, and we really shouldn't be.
It's really honestly wild to me that it's like a fascinating thing how much we can forget that we all participate in this same fundamental experiences of our humanity, and that I think is the greatest tragedy. I have enough, like I get very overwhelmed with the world, and so my only way of dealing with it is to basically say, okay. Okay. So that's what it is. Okay. So what can I do in this moment? I can not buy, fast fashion, and I can watch my water intake, and I can do the things that I can do in the world in this small way. I can donate money where it's necessary. I can go to protest if it's something that I can do, like we'll do it. Otherwise, okay. And that's my kind of nihilistic just way of coping. But I think that the greatest tragedy that I just can't get behind and just feel like I accept in some kind of numb way is that we have this illusion that we are not the same, that we are all the same. We all come from this. We all had a mother. We all had experiences of loss and fear And it is just unfathomable to me that we are in an age where that idea might kill us. Just the illusion of differentness, of otherness. Mm-hmm. That scares me most of all. And I'm not just like, getting on a soapbox about the divisiveness in America. I mean, across the board, all over the place, everywhere, in every situation. So it's just, that's the thing that upsets me the most. And the thing that I kind of, in my head at least, have a little bit of a crusade against, even when I'm teaching tarot readers. I have a class that I do for my past students where I teach them, professional reading, and we get more into it that way. Even in that way, we have a tendency to have a client come before us and to see them as an other. That's a really weird decision they're making. Why would they be so stupid as to do that? Or why are they like going back to the guy? Oh my God, enough with the stupid guy, right? We have like the judgments and the thoughts. And the thing I think I can do that's most important as a reader is to believe that their soul is as real and precious as mine is. And to honor that, yeah, they might be making a terrible mistake. It's theirs to make, and it's important that they make it. And the best I can do is to help them with the questions that they have in the moment. But to believe in the soul of another that is in some way draws from the same source mine does. That's the one thing I can do for a person. And I really hope that that's thinking of the collective unconscious in this way. I hope that there's some small way we can reground into that truth, as like overly spiritual and like kumbaya as it sounds. It's true. I really do think it is.
I think that that's beautifully said. And there's a lot of material realities that need to change in order for people to be able to do that. But then also having conversations like that with people in our midst is also really, it's also part of the puzzle. So I think that is really important to know.
I think that overall, with the, thinking about the collective unconscious and understanding its power in our lives, just by working with cards and stars and these sorts of things, that's what we're participating in, right? We're trying to find the collective thread that unites us all and how we individually experience it. The cards are the same for everybody that pulls them. They pull the same cards. There's the same set of 78 cards. You might have slightly different interpretations of them and all that stuff. It's the same image. What do we draw from it? We have a very limited set of planets and asteroids and stars and things, and they appear in an individual way for every person. How do we experience it based on these conditions? And that's the task with embracing the collective unconscious, is to say, I meet you, others in the world, on some fundamental level, and also honor my individuality and don't lose it in face of that. And so that's the balance of how we work with it. But I think that working with it is very, very important for having any kind of sense of belonging in humanity, sense that there's meaning for humanity to be here at all.
Totally. Yeah. Yes. So that is all beautiful. And I feel like that's like a natural conclusion for us, unless we have anything else. But I feel like, just kind of opening this door for people to explore the concept of the collective unconscious is important right now. And yeah, are there any like writings or anything that you would suggest to people who are curious? It's so hard. It's just kind of embedded in like everything.
It's embedded, yeah. So it's like if you pick up any Jungian book, it's going to be in it. And I don't want to send people off to read like his essays on the collective unconscious because they're boring as hell.
Yeah, it's dense. It's okay.
I think that something that I've read recently, which I thought was really worth investigating, is James Hollis's Archetypal Imagination.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to read that.
It's short and it's really nice, and it's just an exploration of. It's just like it's focused on art and like kind of talks a little bit about paintings and poetry and stuff like that, and kind of centers like what is the archetypal imagination. And by that, he basically means drawn from the collective unconscious, like the imagination drawn from it. So that could be like a sweet sort of little entry point to understanding how it appears in art and stuff like that. Also, just listen to This Jungian Life. That's like their main thing, is like looking at the ways the collective unconscious is experience. So it's a really great place to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great one.
Cool.
All
right, we're gonna do a dream.
Okay.
If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review or learn more about how you can support us on Mighty Networks, where you can get access to some exciting exclusive offerings. Or you can connect with us by sharing a symbolic experience, whether from a dream or synchronicity, for us to explore on the show. Thank you to today's sharer, and please tell us your symbolic experience or connect with us on our website, sorormysticapodcast.com.
Are you a small business looking to reach a targeted audience of people interested in all things esoteric? If this sounds like you, Soror Mystica would love to invite you to become an ad partner. We offer a highly tailored audience of mindful, curious, depth-seeking listeners, and we would be delighted to showcase your business and offerings to new hearts and new minds. Simply fill out an advertiser application form at our website, linked in the show notes below, or navigate to sorormysticapodcast.com/advertise with us. Okay, so our dream comes to us, and it was actually, there's, seeming like we're getting a lot of submissions of animal dreams.
Yeah, a lot of animals lately.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. So the dream goes like this. Our dreamer writes, "My 8-year-old daughter and I were in a school that had 2 separate buildings. For some reason, there were a bunch of wild animals inhabiting one of these buildings. In an attempt to get her and I farther away from the other building, we tried to leave and go into the woods. We were slowed down many times by ongoing classes, stairs, and lots of people crowding some areas we were attempting to move through. Somehow we actually ended up in the other building with the wild animals, and I was very scared. There were other people there, specifically a man that looked like a custodian, but he does not have a familiar face. I'm not sure what happened next, but the next thing I remember is I'm outdoors near the school, and a huge lioness comes and crawls into my lap and takes a nap. We were right under a tree in what looked like a small basin dug into the ground. I was definitely scared and signaling for my daughter to back away. There might have been other people there at that time as well. I did end up attempting to pet the cat while in its slumber, and then I woke up."
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I'd dreamed that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's it's really interesting. Duh, Christina. Okay. So what I think is that there's this obvious fear of the wildness, and then the wildness kind of being inescapable and then approaching the dreamer. I think like one of the most striking images is number one, of being relocated to the building with the wild animals, even though they were trying to get away. And then that secondary image of the lioness coming up and kind of taking a nap in the dreamer's lap. The lioness is not violent or threatening in this dream, at least as far as they described, but there's still this sense of fear, even though the lioness is being very gentle. And so there's this kind of like, it's almost like if we believe that animals in dreams are symbolic of like the soul or the psyche or the collective unconscious or our animal consciousness, which is like different than our sort of logical or logos based consciousness. It's like our instinct, right? And that's where it's coming from. What in this dream are you afraid of being? Why are you afraid of being approached by the instinctive? And can you take comfort in the fact that the instinctive is showing itself to actually be kind of cute and a little bit more cuddly than you might have thought? I also think that we should not discount the deep need to protect the daughter in the dream. I think that that's an instinctive animal kind of thing of like, I need to protect my child at all costs. But that's kind of, again, at odds with the wild nature showing itself to be like amenable. So I find all of that really, really just captivating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, the image of especially the wild animal is usually, deeply connected to the sense of instinct. And when we talk about instincts, Jung talks about it a lot, and it's an interesting idea because we all know what instinct is. Like, it's an impulse, right? Like a flash of like, okay, do this, so this is the right thing, or be scared of that. The instincts are basically our biological drives, our natural drives, and so we know them to be like hunger and shelter, and these are instincts that belonging is an instinct. We usually don't want to be ostracized and out of the group. Jung also said that there's other instincts like creativity, even an instinct for religion, meaning to like find something higher than yourself. There are these like natural impulses that we have as human beings to say, like, this is something that I need. We also have instincts for panic. We have instincts for rage, for even for cruelty. That's even an instinct sometimes if there's somebody that is not our friend. And so when this dream really made me think about the story of Thecla, which I'm probably told on this podcast before, but Thecla she's a very little known saint. Her story basically was kicked out of the Bible and put in the Apocrypha, so we don't really get her story. But basically, she was a young woman in modern day Turkey, and St. Paul was in the area preaching, and so she heard him, and she was like, "I want to be your student," and he was like, "No, you're a woman. Don't think so." And so she followed him all the way to the main city and hundreds of miles. And when she got there, she was attacked by this man, and like she fought back against him, and that therefore she was like sentenced to death because she hurt him in some way. And so she was brought to the arena.
Yay.
And she was going to be killed by wild beasts, because why not get some entertainment out of it? And they first let out the lionesses, and one of them just bowed at her feet and started licking her feet. And so it's this very striking image of like this wildness attacking her. And then one of them recognizing her as, of course, she's a saint. So, like she's protected by God. So the lioness like recognizes that she's beloved by God or whatever. But like the idea is that it recognizes something pure in her, right? And that she has maintained her purity throughout her travels, and she's maintained the faith in herself that says, I know what I want and I'm going to follow my instincts to get it. Even, and I'm going to trust that part of me. And so the lioness bows to her. And so it surrenders its wildness to her, and they kind of like share in this state. And then in the end of the story, the lioness like sacrifices itself, defending her from all the other beasts. And then Thecla baptizes herself because she's so sick of waiting for Paul to do it. She says, fine, I'll do it myself. And, and so I think there's definitely themes of that in this dream of trying to escape the wild beasts, but then being pulled towards them anyway. And then when she actually gets face to face with one, it's not there to attack and maul her. It's there to commiserate with her in some way, to like say, we are one. I put my head in your lap. Like I'm subservient to you, or at least docile around you, which is the strength card. Like
I was just going to say,
in its form,
that's the other image that came up is the strength card.
Yeah. Of like the lion just opening its mouth to the woman and saying, look at my teeth, mom. It's not, there's no fear one way or the other, because there's relationship with wildness and instinct, rather than like a panic around it or a hesitation around it. Right. So my first, instinct around this dream for this person is that there is a question around their experience of encountering some wilder part of themselves. Maybe they might be having some anxiety around things or panic around things that feels like something coming to devour them. And the dream is saying, there's a deeper instinct beneath it that you have to find comfort with, rather than panic around and fear around. It's not here to scare and threaten you. It's actually here to serve you in some way. And there's something in it that's going to strengthen you. So that would be my first guess about where it could be taking this person.
Yeah, I think that there's a deep invitation to ask yourself, why are you or are you keeping your animal instinct experience separate and cordoned off from, your kind of more regular conscious experience? Is there a divide here? And is that divide happening because you've told yourself that it's not safe to let them intermingle? And if that's true, where is that story coming from? Who or what experience has suggested to you that instinct has no home in the same place as your rational experience? And this is not to say like, oh, this dreamer is not in touch with themselves or whatever, but we all go through things in life that scare us and make us want to feel like life is going to be predictable, manageable, controllable, and survivable. And so we do a lot of work at times in our life to kind of banish and cordon off the things that are more instinctive or wild or unexplained or uncontrollable. And so I feel like this dream is a really beautiful invitation to like reconnect with that animal side of the self. And, I just think that that's the most potent kind of, meaning that I'm discerning here.
Yeah, there's also like a little Buddha image in it too, with her like sitting under the tree. I just got the very strong image of just the Buddha sitting under the tree and like it sounds like it's in like a lowered kind of area.
Like a ditch kind of.
So it's like, I'm almost like picturing like the world navel kind of like image, and then the lion just laying head in the lap. It feels very mythic to me. So I think there's absolutely something, whenever we see trees in dreams, especially in these kinds of ways where they're like centered or there's something about them that seems solitary, it's often a symbol for the self, the capital S self, meaning like that central experience of our whole personhood, which we're always trying to get to. We're trying to feel integrated. We're trying to feel at once like the little I and the big I at the same time. And so the fact that that's where the lioness meets you also, I think, goes with what Christina's saying of like, it is a really important kind of moment of integration with the animal side and the higher state too. So I would say that with this dream, in working with it, is to just consider, what does this animal part of you, where would it guide you? What, doing some questioning of like, what does it have to teach you? Right? What does it have to say to you? And just meditating on that question. That alone could be a very interesting sort of exploration to take it deeper.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. This is a great dream.
Yeah, very pretty. Okay, so thanks for sharing. And don't forget that the Jungian Psyche, Tarot and Psyche class is happening in the beginning of January. Christina has her forecasting workshop coming up quite soon. Her books are open. Don't forget about that. Those are all our announcements. And yeah, great. Okay, thanks. Thanks for sticking around with us. We hope you enjoyed talking about the collective unconscious.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us in our conversation today.
Please consider supporting the podcast by leaving a review and following Soror Mystica wherever you listen.
You can also become a more active supporter and a member of the Soror Mystica community by joining us on our Mighty Networks platform.
If you have a symbolic experience that you'd like to share with us for the podcast, you can tell us all about it at sorormysticapodcast.com.
The music for this podcast is written and performed by me, Mariana Lewis, with special thanks to Stefan Lewis. You can connect with both Christina and myself on Instagram and get to know our work by clicking on the links in the show notes.
As the alchemical motto goes, as above, so below, as within, so without.
May this ancient wisdom continue to guide you deeper.
Until next time, take good care.